What's up, YouTube? So this week we're actually diving into the motor. We're going to start by pulling off all the exterior sheet metal, then we'll pull off the heads and cylinders. Now the reason we want to do this is because the cylinders had a little bit of water damage because the motor did sit outside under an awning and a little bit of water got into it. We just want to check the motor over really before we put it on the buggy. So once we get those new cylinders on there, then we're going to go back, instead of with the single port heads, which were on that motor, we're going to go with dual port heads, so it'll give us a little bit more power. Let's jump over to the computer real fast and I'll kind of show you what I'm planning. So guys, I wanted to give a quick background for the people who aren't familiar with Volkswagen motors. So a Volkswagen motor is actually air-cooled versus liquid-cooled like a normal car. And as you can see in this animation, that blue arrow on the top is pointing left into that tall housing. That housing actually has a fan inside of it and some vents inside of it, or I guess you'd call them fins. So as you can see in this photo, those weird curved structures actually direct the air. So that air comes in through the top and that big fan on the back of the housing. That fan is actually turned by the crank and that belt that runs up to the generator right there. As that turns, it generates air and pumps it through that housing. From that big housing on top, it goes to the lower housing, which sits over the cylinders and the cylinder heads. That's where the pistons live, and that's where a lot of heat is generated. So that cool air passes over that and pulls the heat off of those cylinders and off the cylinder heads and pushes it out the bottom of the motor. So it's one giant air pump just pumping air over that whole motor. Now that you kind of have an idea of what that looks like, we're actually going to talk about what we're doing. So we're pulling off all of that sheet metal, off the mufflers and everything, the cylinder heads, and the jugs, and we're going to replace all that. So let's jump into it.
Now, one of the benefits of this design is that you don't have to have water cooling, but kind of the downside is that, as you're going to see here, there is a ton of peripheral items on the outside of the machine. So they call these plates that direct the air tin, is what they call it. It's kind of a Volkswagen slang. Andrew's removing all of it. This is what separates the upper air that's being pushed down through the cooling vents from the exhausting air that's heated already. So Andrew has removed the main fan shroud. Now he's removing just the guiding plates. There you can see the back of it where the big solid metal mount is for the fan, and the fan is on the back of the alternator, correct?
Yeah.
So on the side you can also see that the exhaust comes out with the motor as well. That's the entire exhaust. Since it's in the back of the motor, back of the car, it comes out with the motors. It's really, really cool design. You don't see motors like this anymore.
To get a look at what we have here, you can look here. I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if Zoom actually works when in video. I hate that it doesn't focus. Okay, that is red, so I think that is transmission fluid that I poured in there to try to ease up and prevent it from freezing. We go to the other side. This side, it's looking pretty nasty. So, good thing though is both of those are holding water at that level, so it's either so full that it's up to that level, or the valves were closed and it didn't get into the cylinders and it's just the heads that are frozen, which doesn't matter because they're not using these heads. Either way, I'm replacing the cylinders. Well, I have them, so I'm going to replace them. Yep, I'm going to replace them. We'll see. But that's possibly a great sign. We'll see.
A neat little trick whenever you're trying to get frozen or rusted bolts off is take one of these cheap little torches and hold it onto the frozen nut and then slowly work it off. You really don't want to round stuff like this off. It's just such a hassle and can really slow down the project. Just applying a little bit of heat to break the rust that's holding the threads together to kind of create a space, if you will, when you expand the nut metal. So again, Andrew's just back to taking off peripheral items here. I believe he's moving the exhaust. Is that correct, Andrew?
Yeah.
One side's off, the other side can come off quickly. Even though that's heating and contracting, exhaust is typically pretty difficult because it gets so rusty. There's no coatings. It burns off any oil or paint. So now it's down to just the long block. You can see that where it gets its pancake name from. The two pistons are on the opposite sides from each other, kind of like a boxer engine is what they call it. You know, if you've ever seen an exploded diagram as it's spinning, it looks like the pistons are just constantly punching in opposite directions.
So now that I think about it, I didn't drain the oil out of that motor. So I gotta figure out how to either precariously balance it, or get a tray big enough to catch all of it, or take it all down. So that will be the next project, and it should be a blast. So, didn't record it, sorry, forgot to. Drilled some holes through here with a 1-inch, I forget what they call the thing, paddle bit, that's the name. Drilled some holes through here, so I'm going to pull this drain plug, see if we can drain the oil through here into the drop pan below. I may make a mess, and I may have tons of cleaning up to do, we'll see. So I cleaned out the cylinder a little, and I wanted to let you come see kind of what it looks like on the inside. I'm going to zoom in. It's focusing on the stud. Of course it is. Oh, okay. So cylinder walls look alright. This here is just residue marks. There's nothing actually there. It's a smooth surface. Pistons, as you can see, with a little car cleaner, they clean right off. So this is a very low mileage motor. So there's a little bit of a surface and a ring here. I don't see a bunch of hone marks though, so I'm going to end up replacing these with the brand new ones I have already. But these jugs are still usable on just a Baja bug or around the yard bug, but I want to do this buggy right. So we're going to take these off tomorrow, put the new heads on with these, and I want to figure out how to clean out the base of this case. So now that we have the jugs on, I'm going to do the push rod tubes. I'll clean those push rods out just because they may have synthetic still in them. I don't want that getting into this motor for break-in. So I'm going to clean those out. I'm going to put the new bushings, O-rings, bushings, I guess they're bushings, on the end of those push rod tubes, and I'm going to throw those back in. So guys, I don't know if you could see it there, but the stud length is actually different on a single port versus a dual port head. So I've got to order some proper head studs so we can put those heads on and torque them down on all 8 bolts in the right pattern and everything. So the engine's going to be on hold this week. We'll make a part 2 to this video once we get all those new parts in, but thanks for watching. Next week, we're going to be diving into the transmission, so be sure to join on that one.
If you want to join the Chubby Tribe, hit subscribe. I'm Tyler!